This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Kuf Yod Aleph B'Siyata Dishmaya. Another incredible day in the world of Daf. As Baruch Hashem will be concluding the 9th parak of Baba Kama, moving on to the 10th and final parak, the home stretch as we call it, the final little bit more than a week. And B'Siyata Dishmaya, let's get there. And with that, we'll open up that if anyone would like their reach out to partner for Bava Metzia, please feel free. Would it be a schos to share in the spreading of Torah? We pick it up in the bottom of Kuf Yod Amid Beis. We're about 8 lines from the bottom. The 2 dots. Nasan as I kesef la'anshe hamishmar v'chulu. If someone pays back the money to the anshe mishmar and then he is nifter, but he did not bring the karban asham, that is the case we're talking about. The halacha that the Mishnah taught us was that his yarshim cannot collect the money back. So Amar Abaye Shma Mina Kesef Mechaper Mechsa. From the case in which the father paid back, the father paid to the Anshe Mishmar. From here we learn out that the kesef does something. That even without the karban asham, must be the mere paying back of cash that has some level of kapara. Why? Because if it was not a kapara, havamina mahadili arship. Because then, if it was not a kapara, then he didn't get his kapara. So the money should go back to the yarshim. My time, because of course the person, the Ganav, only gave the money al das to get the kapara with the mindset that he wants a tshuva, and if he's not going to get it, then the money should go back. So for the fact that it doesn't, says the Gemara, is a raya, then it must be the money does some level of kapara. Asks the Gemara, but 1 second, anytime you have a karban chatas that the owner is nifter, we should say the same thing. It should become not kadosh that because what's the reason the Bailim separate chatos is to get a kabara? And if the Bailim are nifter prior, then we should say, oh, the whole thing is undone. Says the Gemara, Amri no kasha, chata shemesu bayaleh, helps like gemiri law, tzalacha l'moshe misinai de lamisa asla. Meaning, maybe misvara, maybe you have a good kasha, but we have a special halacha l'moshe misinai dictating that what happens is the chata shemesu bayaleh does not revert back to its status of chulin. Al-Mayata asked the Gemara, 4 lines on the bottom, Kafyudim Beis. Asham shemesu ba'ileh leipuk l'chulin. So we say the same thing by an asham. Answers the Gemara, Ashanam yelchs like a says the Gemara, 1 second, yelchs like a mirila, kol shabachatas mesu ba'asham raya. Any times in the case of achatas that is mesa, the asham is a raya ashetistir until it gets a mum, etc. Elamiyata continues the Gemara, Yavama shenafla levnei muka shchin. A Yavama, her husband dies, so she falls to Yibam, to her husband's brother, who's a mukashrin. He has boils, etc., and he's repulsive to her. Ask the Gemara, tepuk chalitza. She should leave without chalitza for the same svara. But she never originally married with such a mindset. Says the Gemara, Hasam over there in the case of Yibam, Anansadi. We could give witness as we turn over to Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. Anansadi that what? Demenach Nichala Bekoldehu. We could say that it's not true that she, if you would have told her back when she got married, guess what? Unfortunately, your husband might be dying. He might fall from his brother who's a mukashrin. She would still get married. Why? And this really brings us all the way back to Gemaras in Kedushin and Gemaras in Yavamis and Gemaras in Ksubis, which touch upon the fundamental idea of a woman's approach to marriage. That what? Kireish Lakish, the Amar. Tav lemesav tan nedu lemesav armlu. The famous line of Rish Lakish that a woman rather live as two than live alone, meaning she'll take marriage in any form of the word, even if she were to know that it's going to result in such a travesty, she's going to fall to Yibam to someone she won't want to do Yibam to, etc. Continues the Gemara. Nasan esakesef liyoirav, and he gave the asham to the mishmar of Yodaya. So we said he's yaitz. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Nasan asham liyoirav, v'kesef liyoyada, yachzir kesef itzel asham. The kesef goes where the asham is, to whom the mishmar of Yoyarav, the Yoyada has to give the money to Yoyarav. Yaakshi case of us, Eitzel Asham, David Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim Oimrim, the exact opposite. Yachzer Asham, Eitzel Kesef. Says the Gemara, Hechi Dami, what's going on over here? Ilema, Diahiv Le Asham Le Yarav, Bimishmartoi. You gave it to Yarav while it was his time, while his Mishmar was working in the Beis HaMikdash. Yarav, excuse me. B'mishmartoi Yarav. You gave it to Yarav in the Mishmar of Yarav. Liyada b'mishmartoi liyada. And you gave the money to Yada during his Mishmar. Zezacha b'shalai. Zezacha b'shalai. So why would anyone have to give to each other? It's true you gave it to two different Mishmaris because you gave it at different weeks. 1 week was Yarav. 1 week was Yada. And in different weeks you gave the money. So why is anything going back? So Amar Rava, says Rava, Hacha b'maya skina, do you know what's going on over here? The Yahiv, says Rava, Asham le'yarav b'mishmartei da'yarav. The Asham indeed went to Yarav during his Mishmar. But the Kesef le'yada b'mishmar da'yarav. So in the same week of Yarav, he gave the Asham to them, and then he gave the Kesef to a different Mishmar to Yada. So that's the case that we have this machlaikas. Rav Yehuda savar kivan dulav Mishmar to Yada. He Yada can sinolei. It's not Yada's week this week, and he gave them the money, so he penalized them. Why did they accept the cash? It's not their week of service to the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore the money goes back to Yarav. For Rabbanan Savri, Shalaika Hu Havid, says the Rabbanan, Yarav acted wrong, B'nei Yarav. The Kiblu Asham Makmi Kesef, they should not have accepted the carbon. They didn't get the cash. Hilkach, because they acted wrong, and that's the reason why we return the Asham to the Mishmar of Yodah next to the money. Says the Gemara, that's the Machlekes of Yehuda and the Chachamim, whether the money goes back to he who had the Asham, or whether the Asham goes to they who had the money. Continues the Gemara, Raya to Rabbi Yehuda, Tanya. Amar Rabbi L'Divi Rabbi Yehuda, Kidmu. B'nei Yoyarav Yekrivu as Asham. If the people of Yoyarav went and brought the Asham, Yasav Yavi Asham Acher, they have to bring another Asham, Yakrinu B'nei Yoyda. And the people of Yoyda have to bring it, V'zacha Halalu. And the people of Yoyarav are Zayich Mashav, now which they have. So Amri, Lamai Chazi, Asham Pasalu, Amarava Le'oirai, they get the hide. So we see an explicit brisa, like the opinion of Rab Yehuda. Continues the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, we're about 10 lines from the medium-sized lines, Kufir Aleph, Amar Aleph. First one line is Hu Amar. Tanya Amar Rabbi L'Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Im kayim asham yachzer asham itzel kesef. If the asham is still around, you give it to the kesef. I Rav Yehuda yachzer kesef itzel asham. Rav Yehuda said the exact opposite. Asked the Gemara. Islay. Hachamay Eskina explains the Gemara. Ki on the nafak mishmarta yarav. The case that were referred to in this brisa is that Yoyarav's mishmar finished, and they didn't ask the money back from Yoida. So the chiddush is that we consider it that they were meichel to that mishmar, and that's why in this brisa the din is different. Hani idach, another brisa, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mkiyam Asham Yachzer Kesef Eitel Asham Pshita Hachi Islay Hachamayaskina going to nothing Mishmarta Dahani Vahani Valai Tibau. Both Mishmara is finished and no one demanded back the cash. So Mao the team, I would have thought Achuli Kabi Adadi that they're both being Meichlik. I mean, Kivdal Tibai Lahadru Beresha goes back to the original halacha, which he does give the money back to Yehoy Yarov. Continues the Gemara. Continues the Gemara, the two dots on the second medium-sized line. Shehamevi Gizelad Shalavi Ashamai. Said if you bring the money and you didn't bring the Asham, you're Yaitse. But if you bring the Asham without the money, then you're not Yaitse. Menan immediately, where do we know to make such a split? Amar Rava Damar Cross says the pasuk. Ha'asham ha'moishav la'Hashem na'koyin. The Asham that it has to be given to Hashem, not Koyin. It has to go to the Koyin. So Mechlal, what do we see from here? The Kesef Bereisha. That money goes first. Ask the Gemara and Rava. Amar Omer Rabban Rava. Elameyata milvad oilas ha'boiker. The pasuk of the Sefer the oil of the morning. Achanam Mechlal the Musafim Bereisha. Are you going to tell me that from the Mechlal, from the milvad, shows the other karbanos come first? So you're going to suggest that the Musaf comes first. But we learned in the Braysim Minayin Shlo Davar. But we know that nothing comes before the carbon tam shel shachar. Ve'amar Rav, and it was Rav himself that said oila rishayna. Amar le anoma sheyichubar banafka le vadayin lo yikiper sheyuchaper ba. You get the karpara, and this person did not as of yet. And we go to the end of the Mishnah that said nasan lo yisay keren. If he gave to the kohen the karim, didn't give him the chaimesh, then he still gets the kapara even without the chaimesh. How do we know if someone who took the property of the Beis HaMikdash and utilized it incorrectly, and therefore he bought back the payment, but he didn't bring the carbon asham, or he brought the carbon asham, but he didn't bring the money to pay back for that which he did wrong? How do you know you're not yoytzei tamlemer ba'el ha'asham v'nislach loy? You have to have both. B'nayin shemevi asham or yad shalohevi milas shayatza tamlemer ba'el ha'asham b'kvar. So yachol, I would think yishim she'el v'asham me'akvim kach chaymesh me'akev. So maybe a chaymesh says well me'akev. Tamlemer ba'el ha'asham v'nislach loy el v'asham me'akvim be'hektish. But in our case, over when you return the Gzelu, you just didn't give back the Chaimesh. Vein Chaimesh Ma'akid. Says the Gemara, 1 second, why not? You allow me to Hektish Mehedi, Vehedi Mehektish. Hektish Mehedi Ma'asham Da'asam Karen, Av Asham Da'acha Karen. Vehedi Mehektish Mehektish, Ein Chaimesh Ma'akiv, Vehedi Mehektish Ma'akiv. So says the Gemara that indeed we could learn one from the other. We could learn Hektish from Hedir and Hedir from Hektish. Hadron Halach HaGoizel Eitzim. We definitely have to start doing Chazara. As you end the Masechta, as the time that you realize that, there's always parts that we could be learning better. And let's take the Chizuk. Let's find some more time for Chazara before Baba Kama passes by. And before we know it, we're going to be holding in the middle of Bamitzia. Let's not lose and leave Baba Kama. And we turn over to Kuf Yud Aleph Amid Beis. Says the Mishnah, Hagoizel Machel. From the title already, you could tell that it's going to be a similar sugya from the previous parak. Says the Mishnah, Hagoizel Machel as one of his someone stole something and he fed that item to his children. V'iniach lefneim, or he left it in front of them as the Yerusha, Petur Milashale. They are potter from paying back that item. V'ma yadavar. But if it's something that has a chrais, which we know means karka, then chayav l'shalim, then they have to return the karka. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chista. If someone stole something and the owner was not miyayesh, owner did not despair of getting you back, and someone else comes along and consumes it while it's in the possession of the ganav, mi menu. So then the one who had the item stolen from him could collect from either party. My taima. As long as there's no yush, it's always considered like it's in the rishos of the original owner. So if the Ganav has it, then we collect from him. And if the guy who ate it from the Ganav's rishos, he is as well considered as if he took it from the original person's rishos. And therefore, they can collect from him as well. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, ask the Gemara, our Mishnah. Tiyovta, dear Rav Chisda, as a kashan Rav Chisda. Our Mishnah said, Beturim Elishalim. Rav Chisda seemingly says, Chayav Elishalim. Lecha Rav Chisda, Ki Tanya Hi. That was referring to Ahi La'achar Iyush. That's when we say you're potter. That's our Mishnah. But my memra, says Rav Chisda, is indeed accurate as well. And we continue from the 2 dots, 10 lines down. Quoting the Mishnah, Peturem Elishalem. If you left item for them, they don't have to pay back. Zois Eimeres. What do we learn from here? Rishos Yayesh. Kirishos Loikeach Dami. An inheritor is similar to a purchaser. That it's considered that there's a Shinoi Rishos. It's considered that it left the Ganav's Rishos and came into someone else's Rishos, similar to if someone would have bought it. And that's the reason why they don't have to pay it back, as we have a Shini Rishos, which is going to be a kinyan on the item. My Rava disagrees with Rav Chama, and he says, Rishos Yoresh Lav, Kershos Loikeach Dami. There's no kinyan that happens. So if there's no kinyan that happens, says the Gemara, so why in our Mishnah do they not have to pay back? The Yarshim do not have to pay back. The case is where they already consumed it, and therefore, since the item is no longer here, therefore the Yarshim do not have to pay back to the Nigzal. Ask the Gemara the obvious kasha. Hamidetani, say for the end of the Mishnah said, the second part of the Mishnah says if it's something with a chrayis, then you got to give it back. So what does it sound like? Sounds like the first part of the Mishnah is at least dealing with something that's around. So how can you tell me they consumed it? Ask the Mara what second Vamasle Rebbe. The Rav Shimon Brei loy davar sheish b'achrayis mamish. It doesn't mean something that actually has a chrayis. Elo, what does it mean? Avilu para v'chayrish ba chamaru mechamer achareho. An ox or a donkey that you worked it. Chayavan lahachzem v'nei kavoid aviyem. So therefore, from the Mishnah, it seems that the item is still around, which would thereby indicate that the first case of the Yarshim as well, the item is there. Ela Amar Rava, says Rava, Ki Kishayevne, Rav Oishia Nafak Levasi. When I am Nifter, says Rava, Oishia will come out and greet me. The Taritzah Mastizik Avasek, I explained the Mishnah, the Bryce is like him. The Mishnah is like his Bryce. The Tani Rav Oishia. Ha Goiz Elo Machales Bano Patur Milishalim like our Mishnah. Hinir Lem Gzela Kayames Chayav. Ein Gzela Kayames Paturim. So says the Gemara that we could read into our Mishnah similar to the Brayser of Oishia. Then there's no kasha that from the Seifa it's Gzela Kayemes. Seemingly the Reisha is not, as the Brayser explicitly speaks out. That is not the case. Says the Gemara, Omar Mar. Let's dive back for a moment into the statement that Rav Chisda made a minute ago in Gzela Kayemes Beturin, that if the Gzela is no longer around, then they are pot. Why? So that, so that is a kasha on the Rav Chisda we just said. That's all. Achar Yush. One more kasha on Rav Chisda. Amar Mar. Gzela kayemes chayim l'shalim. They would have to the Rami Rachama. Actually, not in Rachis to the opposite. Rami Rachama. Rami Rachama. Ki Tanya. When was that referred to? As he turned over to Kufi Bezim and Al for a moment. Lifnei Yosh. That was all Lifnei Yosh. Stop over here. We'll pick it up from Ravada Ramasna B'siyata Dishmaya.